Hello YouTube, Jeremy with Four Sons Off-Road again. Well, today we've got our little Suzuki Carry DA63T up on blocks here because we're going to check the water pump and alternator belt just to make sure that it's in good condition and tensioned properly. Really simple job, just a few tools that are needed for this one. So simply we've got our 3/8 ratchet with a 12mm socket on there. We've got a 10mm Allen socket, or you can use a 10mm Allen wrench, either works as long as you have that, and a 12mm standard wrench and just a Phillips screwdriver. Now, of course, we do have our creeper here as well because we are going to get down underneath this truck today and make it a little easier, but let's get started. Alright, so you can get to these belts from underneath the driver's side seat, but it's a lot easier if you come up from the bottom because you can actually see what you're doing. But we do need to take this plastic panel out of the way just to get easier access there. Real simple to do. You just have a couple of Phillips screws, one here on this model, a couple onto the side and a couple on the other side there. So we'll get that down out of the way and see what we're looking at. Alright, now that we got that panel out of the way, we can see the belt right there. So we just slide up underneath and have a quick look at this thing here. Now, the only thing you're really going to need to touch here today is, well, we're going to inspect everything, but is just the this tensioner. That's the only thing that you need to do any adjustment on with this setup, really simply. Your alternator is just right up at the top here, crankshaft, and then this is your water pump. So we'll have a look once that belt is off at make sure everything's good with all of those. But yeah, first things first. Real simply, we just need to get our 12mm socket and remove this bottom bolt here. You see, this one is just a straight through hole, and then you notice the top bolt has kind of this elongated slider hole. That's what gives you your actual tension adjustment on that belt. But again, we don't need to necessarily remove that one. We're going to loosen that one off, but remove this bottom one, and I'll show you why in a second. Alright, so we've got our ratchet with our 12mm socket. We're just going to go ahead and loosen off this top bolt here real quick. So yeah, just get it nice and loose there. And then this one here, same thing, we're going to pop that one off, and there we go. Get the ratchet out, pop that out by hand. Alright, so this one comes right out, and the reason for that, I don't know if you can see, but you notice that this is actually got a bit of a hex pattern on there, so that's where we're actually going to, when we re-tension, that's how you physically twist this and keep tension on it so that you can actually tension your belt up, because that's what gives your belt, your tightness. So, but again, now that we've got that one out, the tension's taken off, and you should be able to just work the belt off the pulleys. If you have a little bit of trouble, I mean, you can definitely just pop that other bolt out and remove the tension out of the way, but usually if you just walk the belt off pretty simply, it's just going to pop right out there. Alright, let's go have a look at that belt. Alright, so we've got the belt out here. It actually looks to be in really good condition. If we check it out, no cracks, no tears or, spots where it looks like it's burned. Look on the inside of the belt, that's generally where you're going to see the most damage. If you see checking, like you'll see crack marks all across. If your belt is kind of old and brittle, you're going to see that pretty easily on the underside ribs here. This one looks to be in really good shape. No cords hanging out, off the sides or any fraying. No cracks at all on those ribs. So this belt's pretty good. We'll just stick her back in there. Okay, so before we just stick that belt back in or replace it, we're just going to go and check everything. Your tensioner here, this is a great big bearing basically that this tensioner rolls on, so we want to check that that's spinning nice and freely, and it is. There's no play, definitely good solid condition. Alternator pulley, you can check that from the top side. Again, just make sure everything's tight, there's no damage or excess of wear on the pulley. And then of course the water pump, same thing, we want to check that, make sure it's in good shape. Give that a good little spin there, and again make sure it's turning freely. It's not seized up or crunchy at all. A lot of times a belt will start squeaking, and first thing a guy thinks is, oh, it's just loose or a bad belt, and then you don't check something like your water pump and realize your water pump is seized up, and that's what was causing your belt to squeak. But here everything looks to be in good shape. All the pulleys are good. No major wear or contamination by the looks of it, which is good. No leaks or anything there. So yeah, we can pop that belt back up into place. Alright, so I apologize for the tight camera angles here, but we're going to start by getting the belt back over the alternator pulley and down around the tensioner. And again, make sure that that belt is seated in that pulley, that the belt ribs aren't hanging over the side. And again, you can check for that from the top if you can't see it or feel it from down here. We're down around the tensioner. Of course, we go over the crankshaft pulley there and then up around our water pump. Again, if it gets tight at this point, you can just try to get it on the bottom there as best as you can and just give it a little walk on there, and it should go on pretty easily for you. So that's good. So yeah, make sure you're all nice and centered on all the pulleys. You wouldn't want that to be off-centered and then go and tighten up the tensioner. But yeah, that's the next thing we're going to do, is just show you how to tighten that back up. Alright, this part might be a little tricky to film because I do need two hands for this, but we've got our 10 mil socket, 10 mil Allen socket on our ratchet here, and we're going to go ahead and insert that up into the just into that hexed hole where that bottom bolt came out of. Now you see when we turn this, it turns that tensioner in the slot, and you notice that's what physically puts tension on that belt. So I do need two hands for this, because once you basically put the tension on, you've got to hold that with the one wrench and then tighten the bolt on top with your other 12 mil wrench. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Alright, so now that we've got the that top bolt tightened up, with the pulley tensioned in the proper spot. Now for tension, there's a couple of different ways that you can check for tension. One of the most common ones, sorry about the, again, tight camera angles here, but on your longest run, so this would be across the top where the belt runs from the water pump all the way up to the alternator there. They say you should be able to twist the belt 90 degrees. And this one does go 90 degrees quite easily, no problem. If you can't twist the belt at all, you might be a little too tight, or if it's really loose and floppy, well, you're probably going to have issues there with squeaking. So we've got good tension on that belt there, so we're just going to go ahead and replace that bolt that we removed. And once we got everything back into place there, we're going to just go ahead and tighten both of those back up with that socket, just to make sure everything's torqued up, and should be good to go. We'll just need to replace that bottom plastic pan, and that's pretty much it for this job.